At 15, my parents forced me out into a raging storm because of my sister's lie. And just hours later, when the hospital called, my father's hands began to shake when he saw who had saved me. My name is Avery Collins, and I am 28 years old. 13 years ago, during a violent October storm in Maple Ridge, Vermont, my father opened the front door and told me to leave. Not tomorrow, not after we calmed down. Right then. I was 15. Rain blew sideways through the doorway, cold droplets scattering across the hardwood floor my mother polished every weekend. Thunder rattled the windows hard enough to shake the framed family photos lining the wall, smiling versions of us frozen in moments that suddenly felt fake. My father stood rigid, one hand gripping the door, his expression colder than I had ever seen. "I won't tolerate this anymore," he said. "I don't want someone in this house who hurts her own family." For a second, I honestly thought he didn't mean me. Behind him, my younger sister Lily Collins sobbed loudly on the couch, buried in our mother's arms. Mom stroked her hair, whispering comfort over and over, never once looking in my direction. I kept waiting for her to stop this. Parents were supposed to stop things before they went too far. "Dad," I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay calm. "It's storming outside." Lightning flashed behind him, illuminating rain pouring down the street like sheets of glass. His answer came instantly. "You should have thought about that before what you did." I hadn't done anything. That was the part no one wanted to hear. For nearly an hour I had tried explaining. The fake messages, the rumors Lily claimed I spread, the bruise she said I caused. Every word only made things worse. The more desperate I sounded, the more convinced they became that I was lying. Because Lily was crying, and in our house, tears were proof. I searched my mother's face, silently begging her to meet my eyes. One look of doubt would have been enough. She turned away. Something inside my chest folded inward. My hands trembled as I grabbed my jacket from the hook near the door. The zipper caught twice before finally closing. Part of me moved slowly on purpose, stretching seconds into hope, convinced Dad would sigh and tell me to stop being dramatic. The door stayed open. Cold wind rushed inside. No one stopped me. I stepped onto the porch and turned back one last time. Lily lifted her head. For a split second, her crying stopped completely. Her expression shifted. Calm, almost relieved, before she buried her face against Mom again. The door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed louder than thunder. I stood frozen as rain soaked through my clothes within seconds. Water ran down my face, mixing with tears I didn't remember starting. I waited, counted silently. 1, 2, 3. Maybe Dad would open the door again. Maybe Mom would come outside with an umbrella. Maybe this was just a mistake. The porch light flicked off instead. That was when I understood something I had never allowed myself to believe before. I wasn't being punished. I was being erased. I stepped into the storm. The neighborhood looked unfamiliar under sheets of rain. Warm yellow lights glowed behind closed curtains, while wind-bent trees nearly sideways. Somewhere a trash can rolled across the pavement with a hollow metallic scrape. My phone buzzed weakly in my pocket. Low battery, 8%. I called my best friend Noah first. No answer. I tried another friend. Straight to voicemail. Friday night meant everyone was home, safe with families who locked doors to keep storms out. Not children. The wind pushed against me as I walked, each step heavier than the last. I told myself this wasn't permanent. I told myself parents didn't really abandon their kids. But doubt crept in anyway. Maybe something really was wrong with me. Maybe I deserved this. Lightning split the sky again, revealing the empty road stretching ahead. Rain blurred everything beyond a few feet, turning the world into noise and shadow. I didn't know that within hours flashing ambulance lights would replace that lightning. I didn't know the next time my parents saw me, I would be lying in a hospital bed. And I definitely didn't know the stranger who would refuse to leave my side that night would become the person who changed my life forever. If someone had told that soaked 15-year-old girl walking alone through the storm that this moment wasn't the end of her story, only the beginning, she wouldn't have believed them. I just kept walking. Into the rain, into the dark, and completely out of the life I thought was mine. Long before the storm, before the accusations and the slammed door, there were smaller moments that should have warned me something was wrong. At the time, they didn't seem important. Families weren't perfect. Siblings fought. Parents made mistakes. That was what I told myself whenever something felt unfair. Looking back now, I can see the pattern clearly. I was 11 when I won first place at the Regional Science Fair in Maple Ridge. My project was a simple water filtration system built from recycled materials. I had spent weeks working on it at the kitchen table, staying awake long after everyone else went to bed, testing different layers of sand and charcoal while the house slept around me. When they called my name, pride rushed through me so strongly it almost hurt. I ran home holding the blue ribbon tightly in my hand. Mom stood in the kitchen chopping vegetables when I burst through the door. "I won," I said breathlessly. "First place!" She smiled and hugged me. "That's wonderful, Avery." For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then the front door opened again. Lily walked in from dance practice crying. "I messed up my routine," she sobbed. Everyone laughed at me. Mom's arms left me instantly. She knelt beside Lily, voice soft and urgent. "Oh, sweetheart, it's okay." I stood there holding my ribbon while they moved into the living room together. Dinner became about cheering Lily up. Dad came home and immediately focused on comforting her. No one asked about the competition. My ribbon stayed on the counter overnight. That was the first time I learned something without anyone saying it aloud. Lily's feelings mattered more than my achievements. As we grew older, the pattern only deepened. Straight A's earned a distracted nod from Dad. One bad grade from Lily meant long conversations, reassurance, and special treats to make her feel better. "She's sensitive," Mom would explain gently. "She needs extra support." I became the child who didn't need anything. At 13, I stopped showing report cards. At 14, I stopped mentioning accomplishments altogether. It was easier not to expect pride than to feel invisible. The summer before high school, I earned a full scholarship to a 2-week environmental science program at Greenhaven University. I rehearsed telling my parents for days, hoping maybe this time they would celebrate with me. At dinner, I placed the acceptance letter beside my plate. "I got in," I said carefully. Dad glanced at it briefly. "That's nice." Mom smiled politely. Then Lily's fork clattered loudly. "Why does she get to leave?" she asked, voice trembling. The room fell silent. Mom looked at me thoughtfully. "Maybe you could go next year. Your sister's been anxious lately." I stared at the letter. 2 weeks with real researchers, something I had dreamed about for years. "I can stay," I said quietly. Relief crossed their faces instantly. That night, I folded the acceptance letter and put it in a drawer. I never opened it again. Being loved, I learned, meant being easy, not asking for attention, not creating conflict, not needing too much. The lies started small after that. A sweater disappeared from my closet and showed up in Lily's room. When I mentioned it, Mom sighed and told me not to start arguments. Money went missing from her purse. Lily said she saw me near the kitchen earlier. I lost my phone privileges for a month even though I insisted I hadn't touched it. Each time Dad used the same disappointed tone. "I expected better from you." Eventually, I began doubting my own memory. Maybe I really was careless. Maybe I was the problem. Lily was never punished. Sometimes, when our parents weren't looking, she gave me a small, knowing smile. Not cruel exactly, just confident. Like she understood rules I hadn't learned yet. By 15, home felt unpredictable. I stayed late at school whenever possible, volunteering for extra projects just to delay going back. Outside the house, I felt normal. Inside it, I felt like a mistake waiting to happen. If you've ever been the quiet one, the child who learned to stay strong so everyone else could fall apart, you probably understand how invisible that strength can feel. Stories like this matter because sometimes hearing someone else say it out loud reminds us we weren't imagining things. And we weren't alone. I didn't know then how quickly everything was about to collapse, because the next piece of the story arrived in the form of a boy named Daniel Brooks. And Lily's jealousy would turn years of imbalance into something impossible to fix. Daniel Brooks transferred to Maple Ridge High halfway through junior year. To most people, he was just another new student trying to figure out schedules and lockers. To me, he was simply the guy who sat 2 rows behind me in chemistry and constantly looked confused whenever equations appeared on the board. The first time he spoke to me was after class. "Hey," he said, holding up his notebook awkwardly, Can you explain this? I swear everyone else understands except me. I laughed softly and stayed a few minutes to help him balance the equation. That was all it was. Or at least that was all it meant to me. Over the next week, he asked for help again. Then again. We started meeting in the library after school, spreading textbooks across a table while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. There was nothing secretive about it, just studying. But Lily noticed. She developed crushes intensely, the kind that became the center of her world overnight. When she liked someone, every conversation eventually circled back to them. "I think Daniel smiled at me today," she told Mom one evening, cheeks flushed. "He's really nice." Mom smiled immediately. Dad teased her gently about future boyfriends. I stayed quiet. I didn't want conflict over something that meant nothing to me. A few days later, I noticed Lily lingering near my classroom after school. At first, I assumed she was waiting for friends, but she never approached anyone. She simply stood at the end of the hallway watching. Her expression wasn't jealous. It was thoughtful, measuring. One afternoon, Daniel caught me at my locker. "Thanks for helping me," he said. "I actually passed the quiz." "You did the work," I replied. "Still," he added with a grin, "maybe we should study again before finals?" "Sure." The answer came automatically. When I turned, Lily stood halfway down the hall. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling either. Her face was completely blank. That unsettled me more than anger ever could. Dinner that night felt heavy. Lily barely ate. Mom kept asking if she felt okay, but she only shrugged and stared at her plate. Silence from Lily always meant something was building. 2 days later, she stopped talking to me entirely. No arguments. No complaints. Just absence. She left rooms when I entered. Whispered with Mom behind closed doors. Watched me carefully whenever Dad was nearby. Her eyes glossy as if she were holding back tears. The tension in the house felt like static before lightning. That Thursday, our biology class hosted a guest speaker from Greenhaven University, Professor Ethan Hale, an education researcher discussing opportunity and resilience. He spoke about how a single supportive adult could completely change a young person's future. I stayed after class to ask questions. He listened carefully, nodding as I talked. "You think deeply," he said, handing me a business card. "Don't ever let anyone convince you that's a weakness." I slipped the card into my notebook, embarrassed but proud. I had no idea how important that moment would become. By Friday, storm warnings filled every news channel. Meteorologists predicted severe rainfall and dangerous winds overnight. Dad checked flashlights while Mom stocked groceries like we were preparing for something serious. Lily watched me constantly. Every time I looked up, her gaze disappeared too quickly. That evening, we ate dinner while rain hammered against the windows. Emergency alerts buzzed repeatedly on Dad's phone. The air felt tight, like the house itself was holding its breath. After dinner, I went upstairs to finish homework. Around 8 o'clock, crying echoed from downstairs. Loud, desperate. My stomach dropped instantly. Mom's voice followed, alarmed. "Lily, what happened?" More sobbing. Then Dad's voice, sharp and angry. "Avery, come downstairs, now." Something in his tone made my hands go cold. I walked slowly toward the living room, each step heavier than the last. Deep down, I already sensed this moment mattered, that something irreversible was about to happen. When I entered, Lily sat curled on the couch, face buried in Mom's shoulder. Dad stood near the fireplace, arms crossed tightly. All three of them looked at me like I didn't belong there anymore. "Tell her," Dad said quietly. Lily lifted her head, eyes red and shining. Her voice trembled perfectly. "Why do you hate me so much?" The question hit harder than any accusation. "What?" I whispered. Her lip quivered. "Why have you been spreading rumors about me at school?" My mind went completely blank. And in that moment, before I even understood what she was accusing me of, I felt my life begin to tilt beneath my feet. For a few seconds after Lily's accusation, the only sound in the room was the storm. Rain slammed against the windows and thunder rolled so loudly it seemed to shake the walls. The overhead light flickered once before steadying again, casting long shadows across faces that suddenly felt unfamiliar. "I don't hate you," I said carefully. "What are you talking about?" Lily's shoulders trembled as she reached for her phone on the coffee table. Her hands shook convincingly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then explain this." She handed the phone to Dad first. I watched his expression change. confusion tightening into anger almost instantly. Mom leaned closer, her face falling into quiet disappointment. Only then did Lily turn the screen toward me. A group chat filled the display. My name appeared at the top. My profile picture. Message after message scrolled downward. Cruel comments supposedly written by me. Messages mocking Lily, accusing her of cheating, saying people only pretended to like her. One message mentioned Daniel, suggesting he pitied her. My stomach dropped. I didn't write those, I said immediately. Dad's voice cut through the air. Enough! I'm serious, I insisted. Someone's pretending to be me. Lily sobbed harder. Why would anyone do that? I don't know, I said, panic rising. But it's not me. Mom shook her head slowly. Avery, this is cruel. I didn't do it. My voice cracked despite my effort to stay calm. Dad stepped forward, jaw tight. Your sister has been miserable all week because of this. I didn't even know. And Daniel, Lily whispered suddenly. Her voice trembled perfectly. You knew I liked him, she said, but you kept meeting him after school. That was studying, I said quickly. He needed help. You tried to make me look stupid. I didn't. Her crying grew louder, drowning out my words. Mom wrapped her arms around her protectively, glaring at me as if guilt had already been decided. Then Lily slowly rolled up her sleeve. A dark bruise marked her forearm. The room spun. She pushed me, Lily whispered, on the stairs. I stared at the bruise, confusion crashing into fear. I never touched you. Dad's face hardened instantly. Are you calling your sister a liar? I don't know how she got that, I said desperately, but I didn't do it. Lily gasped dramatically. You think I hurt myself? The thought sounded impossible, yet the words slipped out before I could stop them. Yes, I said, because you keep lying about me. Silence slammed into the room. Dad struck the mantel with his palm, making me flinch. That's enough, he shouted. My heart pounded painfully. I'm tired of excuses, he continued. Every problem somehow isn't your fault. They're not excuses, I pleaded. Please, just listen. Mom avoided my eyes. We can't ignore this behavior anymore. Behavior. Like I was something broken. Lily peeked through her fingers. And for one brief second, her tears disappeared. Her expression turned calm. Certain. A chill ran through me. You're lying, I whispered. I'm not, she said softly, voice suddenly steady before breaking again into sobs. Dad pointed toward the staircase. Go upstairs. What? I need space before I say something I regret. I walked slowly up the stairs, legs trembling. Inside my room, I sat on the edge of my bed trying to breathe, replaying everything over and over. The messages looked real. The bruise looked real. Everything had been prepared. A terrible realization formed slowly. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Downstairs, muffled voices rose and fell. Lily crying again, Mom comforting her, Dad pacing heavily across the floor. Minutes stretched endlessly until thunder shook the house and Dad's voice echoed upward. Avery, come downstairs. My chest tightened. Something about his tone told me this conversation wasn't about understanding anymore. It was about judgment. And as I walked toward the stairs, a certainty settled deep inside me. The kind you recognize too late, no matter what I said next. They had already decided who to believe. The living room felt colder when I came back downstairs. Not physically. The heater still hummed softly near the wall. But emotionally, like warmth had been pulled out of the house entirely. Dad stood near the front door, arms crossed tightly. Mom sat beside Lily on the couch, holding her hand as if she were protecting her from something dangerous. From me. I stopped a few feet away, unsure where to stand. No one invited me to sit. Dad spoke first. We've talked, he said flatly. My stomach twisted. Okay. Lily sniffled quietly, leaning against Mom's shoulder. She didn't look at me. We can't allow this behavior to continue, Mom added softly. Behavior again. The word felt heavier this time. I didn't do any of it, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Please just check my phone. Check the account history. Someone hacked it or... We are not investigators, Dad interrupted sharply. We're your parents. Exactly, I wanted to say. You're supposed to protect me. Instead, he continued, and right now, I don't recognize the person standing in front of me. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. I'm still me, I whispered. Lily let out another broken sob. Dad's expression hardened further. Your sister is terrified in her own home. I never touched her. Enough, he snapped. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling the windows violently as lightning illuminated the room in brief flashes. Each burst of light made everything feel unreal, like a scene playing out somewhere else. Mom finally looked at me. There was disappointment in her eyes. Not doubt, not confusion, disappointment. We think you need help, she said gently. The sentence froze me. Help? You've been angry for a long time, she continued. Maybe jealous, maybe overwhelmed. My chest tightened painfully. I'm not jealous, I said. I'm just telling the truth. Dad exhaled slowly, like he had reached the end of his patience. You're not taking responsibility, he said. And until you do, this house isn't a healthy place for anyone. The meaning didn't register immediately. Then he reached for the doorknob. My heart stopped. Dad, you need time to think, he said. Rain slammed against the door as he opened it. Cold air rushed inside, carrying the sound of roaring wind. You can come back when you're ready to be honest. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence. The part where he said it was temporary, where he softened, where he realized this was insane. It never came. It's storming, I said weakly. His reply was immediate. That's not my problem right now. The words cut deeper than anything else that night. I turned toward Mom, silently begging. She tightened her arm around Lily and looked away. Something inside me broke quietly. I grabbed my jacket from the hook, fingers numb as I pulled it on. Every movement felt slow, disconnected, like my body didn't belong to me anymore. At the doorway, I hesitated. One last chance, one last hope. No one moved. I stepped outside. Rain drenched me instantly, icy water soaking through fabric within seconds. Thunder cracked overhead, and wind shoved against my back as if pushing me away from the house itself. Behind me, the door slammed shut. The sound echoed through my chest. I stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the window. Shadows moved inside, my family continuing without me. I waited. Maybe Dad would open the door again. Maybe Mom would come running. The porch light switched off instead. Darkness swallowed everything. I stepped down into the storm, shoes splashing through rising water along the street. My phone buzzed weakly. Low battery warning flashing across the screen. I called Noah. No answer. Another friend. Voicemail. Lightning lit the road ahead, empty and endless. For the first time, doubt crept in. Maybe they really believed I was the problem. Maybe I was. The wind howled louder, rain blinding me as I crossed an intersection toward the bus station 2 miles away. The only place I could think of that might still be open. Headlights suddenly appeared through the downpour. Too close. A horn blared. I turned, and everything exploded into light. The sound came before the pain. A long, desperate horn cutting through the storm. Bright headlights swallowed my vision, turning the rain into silver streaks rushing toward me. I tried to step back, but my shoes slipped against the flooded pavement. Then impact. The world spun violently. I felt my body lift, weightless for one impossible second, before crashing down onto cold asphalt. Air rushed from my lungs, and everything went silent except for the pounding of rain against my face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The sky flickered white with lightning above me while water pooled beneath my cheek. Somewhere nearby, a car door slammed open. Footsteps splashed closer. "Oh my God!" a woman's voice gasped. "Stay still, don't move." Warm hands hovered near my shoulders, careful but urgent. "Can you hear me?" she asked. I tried to answer, but only a weak sound escaped my throat. Pain spread slowly through my body, dull and overwhelming. The storm felt distant now, like it belonged to another world. "I'm calling 911, she said, voice shaking but controlled. "Just stay with me, okay?" Her face leaned into view. Dark hair soaked by rain, eyes wide with fear and determination. Something about her felt familiar, though my thoughts struggled to connect the memory. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Avery," I whispered. "Okay, Avery, I'm right here." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. "My parents," I managed. "Yes," she said quickly. "We'll call them. What's their number?" I swallowed painfully. "They don't want me." The words barely existed when they left my mouth. Her expression changed instantly. Shock replaced by something deeper, something protective. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. "They kicked me out," I whispered. "Said I was the problem." Rain ran down both our faces, but she didn't look away. "You're not alone right now," she said firmly. "I promise." The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights reflected across the flooded street as paramedics rushed toward us. Voices overlapped. Questions, instructions, the sharp rip of medical packaging. "She has a head injury," the woman explained quickly. She walked into the intersection. I couldn't stop in time. They lifted me onto a stretcher. Pain flared through my ribs, pulling a cry from my throat before darkness crept in again. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was the woman climbing into the ambulance beside me, not leaving, not even hesitating. "Avy." When sound returned, it came a soft beeping. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but voices drifted nearby. "Severe concussion? Lucky she survived." "I'm staying," the same woman said firmly. A nurse responded gently. "You've already been here for hours." "I'm not leaving her alone." I forced my eyes open. Fluorescent lights blurred overhead before slowly sharpening into focus. Machines surrounded the bed, wires attached to my arms. Every movement hurt, and there she was, sitting beside me. Relief crossed her face when she noticed I was awake. "Hey," she said softly. "Easy." "Hospital," I croaked. She nodded. "You're safe." Her voice felt steady, grounding. "I'm Dr. Caroline Mercer," she added quietly. "I was driving the car." Recognition flickered. She had spoken once at my school, a visiting professor known for her work in youth advocacy and education reform. "You stayed?" I asked weakly. "Yes," she said simply. The door opened suddenly. My parents walked in. Dad looked tense, Mom pale, Lily hovering behind them. Their eyes moved from me to Dr. Mercer sitting beside my bed. Dad froze. Recognition dawned slowly across his face. "You're Dr. Mercer?" he asked. Her expression turned calm but firm. "Yes." Silence filled the room. "She was alone in a storm," Dr. Mercer said quietly. "Why?" No one answered, and for the first time since that night began, I realized something had shifted. Someone was finally asking the question no one else had wanted to hear. If you've ever reached a moment where a stranger showed more kindness than people who were supposed to protect you, you understand how powerful that turning point can be. Sometimes one person choosing to stay changes everything that follows. As exhaustion pulled me back toward sleep, one thought lingered clearly. The person sitting beside me wasn't family, but she was the only one who hadn't walked away. I woke to quiet sunlight instead of thunder. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. The steady hum of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic slowly brought reality back into focus. My head throbbed dully, and every breath reminded me of bruised ribs. The hospital, the storm, the car, and the door closing behind me. I turned slightly and saw Dr. Caroline Mercer asleep in a chair beside my bed, her head tilted awkwardly against the wall, one hand still resting near mine as if she had fallen asleep mid-watch. She hadn't left. The realization felt strange, comforting and painful at the same time. A nurse entered quietly, checking monitors before noticing my eyes open. "Well, look who's awake," she said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Like everything hurts," I murmured. "That means you're healing," she replied with a smile. Her voice woke Dr. Mercer instantly. She straightened, relief washing across her face. "Hey," she said softly, "you gave us a scare." I hesitated. "My parents?" Her expression shifted slightly. "They visited yesterday." "Visited. Not stayed. They brought some clothes," she added carefully, and spoke briefly with the doctors. That told me everything. A knock sounded at the door, and a woman entered holding a folder. "Hi, Avery," she said warmly. "I'm Linda Chavez, the hospital social worker. Is it okay if we talk?" I nodded. She pulled a chair closer, her tone calm and patient. She asked about home, school, and what had happened before the accident. At first I answered cautiously, embarrassed by how unbelievable everything sounded when spoken aloud. But she listened without interruption, so I told her the truth. The accusations, the messages, Lily's lie, being forced outside during the storm. When I finished, silence filled the room. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with understanding. Linda closed her folder gently. "Avery," she said, "you have options." The word startled me. "What do you mean?" "You don't have to return somewhere that isn't safe," she explained. "We can arrange temporary placement while we figure out next steps." The idea felt impossible. Home had never been a choice before, only something that existed whether it hurt or not. "Where would I go?" I asked quietly. Before Linda could answer, Dr. Mercer spoke. "She could stay with me." Both of us turned toward her. "What?" I whispered. Her voice remained calm, certain. "Temporary foster placement. I've already spoken with Child Services about the possibility." I stared at her, confused. "You don't even know me." She met my gaze steadily. "I know enough," she said, "and someone once helped me when I needed it most. I promised myself I would do the same someday." Emotion tightened my chest unexpectedly. "I don't want to cause problems," I said. "You wouldn't," she replied gently. "You deserve stability while you recover." Deserve. The word felt foreign. Linda nodded approvingly. "If this is what you want, we can begin paperwork today." What I wanted. No one had asked me that in years. Fear and relief tangled together inside me. Going back meant returning to a house where my voice didn't matter. Leaving meant accepting that my life might never look the same again. I thought about the porch light turning off, about standing alone in the rain, about waking up to find someone still sitting beside me. "I don't think I can go back," I said softly. Dr. Mercer didn't react dramatically. She simply nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "That's okay," she said. Tears slipped quietly down my temples. Not loud sobs, just release. Later that afternoon, my parents came again. The conversation remained polite and distant, filled with awkward pauses. They didn't ask me to come home, and I didn't ask either. When they left, something inside me felt lighter. That evening, Linda returned with paperwork. Dr. Mercer stayed beside me the entire time, explaining each step, treating my future like something worth protecting. As sleep slowly pulled me under, one realization settled clearly in my mind. The storm hadn't just taken me out of my old life. It had given me a choice. And for the first time, I chose myself. Dr. Caroline Mercer's house didn't look extraordinary from the outside. It was a 2-story brick home on a quiet street in Willow Creek, about 20 minutes from Maple Ridge. Tall maple trees lined the sidewalk, their leaves shifting softly in the wind. A peaceful sound that felt unreal after the chaos of the storm. But the moment I stepped inside, I noticed something different. Silence. Not the tense silence I was used to, where every sound meant someone might be upset. This silence felt calm, steady, almost welcoming. "You can take your time," Dr. Mercer said gently as I stood near the doorway, unsure where to go. I nodded, clutching the small overnight bag the hospital had given me. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Sunlight filtered through wide windows, landing on shelves filled with papers, journals, and framed photos of students standing beside Dr. Mercer at graduations and conferences. Proof of lives she had helped shape. "This will be your room," she said, opening a door at the end of the hallway. It was simple. A bed, desk, dresser, and soft gray blankets folded neatly at the foot. Nothing fancy. Still, my chest tightened unexpectedly. It felt temporary. Safer that way. "Make it yours," she added. "We'll get anything you need." I nodded again, unsure how to respond. Gratitude felt too small compared to what she was offering. That first night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me sit upright. My body stayed alert, waiting for shouting, accusations, or footsteps outside the door. None came. Morning arrived quietly. Dr. Mercer was already in the kitchen making breakfast when I walked in hesitantly. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Eggs or toast?" The question confused me. "Anything is fine," I answered automatically. She smiled gently. "That's not an answer." I froze, realizing I genuinely didn't know what I preferred anymore. "Toast," I said finally. "Toast it is." It was such a small moment, but something shifted inside me. No one had asked what I wanted in a long time. Returning to school felt harder. Transferring midway through the semester meant new teachers, new classmates, and explaining why my address suddenly changed. Dr. Mercer handled most of the paperwork, protecting my privacy while making sure I had support counselors available if I needed them. At first, I kept my head down. Old habits, but slowly things changed. Teachers noticed when I answered questions thoughtfully. Classmates invited me into study groups without hesitation. No one looked at me like I was a problem waiting to happen. I was just Avery. One afternoon, my biology teacher stopped me after class. "You ask questions most students are afraid to ask," she said. "Have you ever considered working in education or research?" The idea stayed with me long after I left the classroom. That evening, I told Dr. Mercer about it while we sat at the dining table doing work side by side. Her reviewing case studies, me finishing homework. "That curiosity is powerful," she said. "Don't shrink it for anyone." The words settled deep inside me. Healing didn't happen all at once. Sometimes loud arguments on television made my heart race. Sudden noises caused me to flinch. Once, when Dr. Mercer spoke sharply during a stressful phone call, I instinctively locked myself in the bathroom before realizing what I was doing. She never made me feel embarrassed. "Your brain learned to expect danger," she explained softly later. "It takes time to relearn safety." Weeks turned into months. Routine replaced fear. Morning breakfasts, homework conversations, quiet evenings filled with normalcy I had never known before. My parents visited only once during that time. The conversation felt polite and distant, like strangers discussing logistics. Lily didn't come. Afterward, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt free. Spring arrived, and with it, college brochures covering my desk. Dr. Mercer helped me research scholarships, encouraging possibilities I had never allowed myself to imagine. "You're capable of more than surviving," she told me one evening. "You can build something meaningful." For the first time, I believed her. The girl who walked into the storm still existed somewhere inside me. But she was changing, growing stronger, learning that safety wasn't a place, it was a person who stayed. And without realizing it yet, I was slowly becoming someone who would one day stand in front of hundreds of people and tell this story not with pain, but with purpose. Time didn't heal everything, but it changed how the memories felt. The first year after moving in with Dr. Caroline Mercer passed in small victories, finishing assignments without fear, laughing without checking someone's reaction, sleeping through the night without waking to imagined arguments downstairs. By senior year, Willow Creek finally felt like home. College applications covered my desk, each envelope representing a future that once felt impossible. Dr. Mercer sat beside me most evenings, helping me revise essays and search for scholarships I had never known existed. "You don't just deserve opportunity," she told me one night. "You've earned it." Those words mattered more than she probably realized, because for years I had believed survival itself was the most I could hope for. The acceptance email arrived on a rainy afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after the storm. Full scholarship. I stared at the screen, rereading the words until they blurred. Dr. Mercer hugged me tightly, laughing through tears. "I knew it," she said. I absolutely knew it. That moment felt like closing a door I had once been pushed through. College became a new beginning. At Northbridge University, no one knew my past. I wasn't the girl accused of hurting her sister. I wasn't the difficult daughter. I was simply Avery Collins. Hardworking, curious, determined. I majored in education policy after realizing how many students slipped through systems meant to protect them. The more I studied, the more I understood how one supportive adult could completely redirect a life. Because it had happened to me. Summers were spent interning with youth advocacy programs. I met teenagers who reminded me painfully of my younger self. Quiet kids carrying stories no one asked about. Helping them felt like healing something inside me. By graduation, I had a plan. I wanted to build programs that gave students second chances. Real ones, not just words. Dr. Mercer sat in the front row during my ceremony, clapping louder than anyone else. When I crossed the stage, I looked straight at her. Not my rescuer, my family. Life moved quickly after that. Graduate school, research work, late nights writing proposals no one initially read. Rejection stacked up until one small grant finally came through. That grant became a pilot scholarship program. 5 students, then 12, then 20. Within a few years, the New Horizons Scholarship Initiative expanded across multiple universities, helping students from unstable homes stay in school instead of disappearing through cracks no one noticed. Media interviews followed, conferences, panels discussing educational equity and youth advocacy. Each time someone asked why I started the program, I gave a careful answer. Because one person believed in me when I needed it most. I never mentioned my parents, or Lily. They became distant memories, not erased, just no longer central to my life. Occasionally, curiosity crept in. Social media made it impossible not to notice glimpses of their lives through mutual acquaintances. Family photos appeared online without me in them, birthdays celebrated as if I had never existed. At first it hurt. Eventually it didn't. I had built something stronger than resentment. Purpose. At 27, our program crossed a milestone, over $200,000 awarded in scholarships. That same week, an email arrived from Ridgeway State University. Subject line, keynote invitation. They wanted me to speak at graduation about resilience and opportunity. I almost declined immediately, until I noticed the graduating class list attached below. One name stopped me cold, Lily Collins. My sister. For a long time, I stared at the screen, memories rising like echoes from another life. Rain, accusations, a slammed door. Dr. Mercer found me later that evening, still sitting at the table. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. I turned the laptop toward her. She read quietly, then looked back at me. "What do you want to do?" she asked. The question mattered, because now the choice was mine. I thought about the girl who had walked into a storm believing she was unwanted. I thought about the life I had built afterward. And slowly I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. "I think," I said carefully, "I need to go." The auditorium at Ridgeway State University was already full when I arrived backstage. Graduates adjusted caps nervously. Families filled rows with flowers and cameras, and laughter echoed through the hall. The kind of joy that belongs to endings and beginnings at the same time. I stood quietly near the curtain holding my speech folder, listening to the hum of voices beyond the stage. 13 years. That was how long it had been since the storm. 13 years since I stood outside my childhood home believing my life was over. Now I was here by choice. Dr. Caroline Mercer squeezed my shoulder gently. "You don't have to do anything except tell your truth." I nodded. For the first time, my hands weren't shaking. When my name was announced, applause rose politely as I stepped into the light. The brightness made it hard to see at first, just shapes and movement. Then my vision adjusted. Row 8, my parents. Older now, my father's hair grayer, my mother's posture softer. Between them sat Lily in her graduation gown, smiling as she clapped, until she recognized me. Her hands stopped mid-motion. Confusion turned to shock. I reached the podium and took a steady breath. "Good afternoon," I began. "Today I want to talk about resilience, about what happens when life changes in a single moment." The room quieted. I spoke about a 15-year-old girl who believed she had lost everything, a girl told she didn't belong, who walked alone into a storm convinced she had nowhere left to go. No accusations, no anger, just truth. And that girl, I said calmly, was me. Silence spread across the auditorium. My mother covered her mouth. My father stared at the stage as if trying to understand how the past had suddenly returned. Lily looked down, shoulders trembling. I continued speaking about second chances, about how one person choosing compassion can change the direction of an entire life, about building purpose from pain instead of revenge. I thanked Dr. Mercer publicly, gesturing toward the front row where she sat smiling through tears. "She didn't just save my life," I said. "She stayed long enough to help me build one." The applause that followed felt warm but distant, like standing inside a memory rather than a moment. After the ceremony, families gathered outside beneath bright summer sunlight. I saw them approaching before they spoke. My father stopped a few feet away. "Avery," he said quietly. "We didn't know." My mother cried openly. "We were wrong. We should have listened." Lily's voice shook. "I'm sorry. I was jealous. I didn't think—" I raised a hand gently. "I believe you're sorry," I said. Relief flickered across their faces. Then I continued softly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was." The relief faded into understanding. "I built a life where I feel safe," I explained, "and I need to protect that." No anger filled my voice, only peace. My father nodded slowly, eyes wet. "We're proud of you." The words would have meant everything once. Now they simply existed. Behind me, Dr. Mercer waited patiently. Home. I turned toward her. Ready? She asked. I smiled. Yes. We walked away together, leaving the past standing where it belonged. As we reached the parking lot, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel heavy anymore. The storm that once felt like destruction had become direction. Every painful step had led me here, to purpose, to chosen family, to a life built on truth instead of fear. If this story has stayed with you, maybe it's because storms exist in many forms. Sometimes sharing stories quietly helps someone else realize they're not alone, and that choosing growth over bitterness is possible, even when healing takes years. Because the truth is simple. Some storms don't end your story. They begin it. And sometimes the moment you're pushed out into the dark is the moment you finally learn how strong you really are.